All right, we are back here talking fantasy football today. Your drafts are coming up over the next couple of weeks. Join me today, somebody whose work you can read here in the NBC Sports Fantasy Edge magazine, and he contributes to NBC Sports Fantasy coverage. John Daigle is here. John, how are you?
Great. How are you doing, Mike?
Pretty good. I also give the plug out to the audience. I do my fantasy research every year. I grab a couple magazines. I grabbed your magazine this year. You guys do a great job in that stuff. Help me really get ready for my draft.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And for those who are not going to stores for whatever reason, not getting the magazine, just know it's also available as an online draft guide at NBCSportsEdge.com. You can use the promo code Daigle10 and still get 10% off right now on the homepage.
That sounds good, but definitely link that to the audience as well. And I want to start out here because obviously we're getting ready for the season. COVID's still an issue a little bit in fantasy, not as much as it was last year when we had no vaccines, but considering right now we have situations where there's some big name fantasy players who you might not have gotten the vaccine. Do you factor that into your draft prep at all? Say, oh, maybe if I know this guy is not vaccinated, but this guy is similar, I'll take him instead to reduce my risk. That's something you're thinking about.
Not so much my draft prep, but it has affected the way I approach season-long betting. For instance, we know Lamar Jackson and Kirk Cousins just are two samples that not only are not vaccinated, but refuse to get it. They've made jokes, they've made social media posts about it, and then deleted them because, of course, their mentions burned to the ground. But we know those guys aren't getting vaccinated anytime soon, for better or worse. So Lamar Jackson is someone in the Baltimore offense that otherwise I'd be betting MVP tickets heavily. I think they're in store for a bounce back after last year, and they regressed because, of course, they regressed. We do this thing in fantasy always where we forget that when a team is like absurdly, elitely better, I don't even know if it's a word, than any other offense, like Lamar Jackson was in 2019 MVP year with a 9% touchdown rate, far and away the best, hence why he won MVP. Then we chased and we draft last year's stats, that's not what we're doing. We're predicting, we're projecting. And so, of course, the Baltimore offense regressed. But over their last 6 games, that's why they averaged over 6 yards per play, because they all got healthy and bounced back. And I would expect that bounce back to continue throughout this year, except for the vaccination issues. So it's more or less making me halt all of my season-long betting because I don't know. But I will still target those guys in fantasy.
Yeah, I wish you had talked to me last year before I picked Lamar Jackson early in the draft and that ended up costing me that season.
Well, how about this? How about I tell you that Josh Allen and the Bills are kind of in store for the same thing, and that doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just happens every year with teams and offenses and players that exceed expectations by a mile. And so I am slightly concerned. I think people are overdrafting all the players for the Bills. Not to say I'm moving Josh Allen like out of my top 5. Let's just say I have that tier of Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Dak, and I'm putting Josh Allen at the bottom of that, whereas everyone else is treating him as the QB 1 or 2.
Yeah, that makes some sense. And start at the top of the draft here. Let's say you're lucky enough, you end up with 1-1 in the draft here. Is it Christian McCaffrey? Is that a lock, or is anybody else you're considering at that pick?
No, it's Christian McCaffrey, and you can't talk me out of it. And if you do a lot of drafts, you'll notice that Christian McCaffrey is the cheat code because it gets a little iffy from that point forward, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But just the fact that you were lucky enough to draw the 101 and you can start Christian McCaffrey, it's so immensely helpful, and it already gives you an edge in your league.
I know the deal because I had McCaffrey in 2019. He was a league winner for me that year. So I know how important he is to have in drafts. But
and even last year, like if someone says, oh, they're going to scale him back so he doesn't get injured, like that's not true at all. Remember, he missed, I think it was 6 games, came back in week 9 or 10 against the Chiefs, and he played 90% of the team snaps, still got 10 targets. He handled every single touch until he got injured again at the end in the fourth quarter of that game. And then they brought Mike Davis in again. Like they're going to give him all the run in the world. Chuba Hubbard is a fine pick in the later rounds, but you pick him like you picked Mike Davis last year, strictly as a contingency plan, not someone who's going to offer any standalone value at all.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense also. And he is the clear 1-1. And we take him off the board here. Considering the rest of the first round, is there a spot you would be if you cannot have the first pick? Like where would you prefer a draft slot be?
I've been doing a couple of the high stake main event drafts right now at FFPC. And I will say that where you don't want to pick is 12. And, it's usually a cliche answer because you think like the best players in the first round are off the board. And sometimes that's not the case. Maybe like FFPC, for example, it's tight end premium. So you're kind of hoping Darren Waller, maybe even Stephon Diggs or Calvin Ridley slip back to 12 and you can double tap two of those three. But if everything lines up accordingly, where like the top 4 receivers go off the board, that includes Calvin Ridley, where the top 5 running backs go off the board, that includes Derrick Henry, and both tight ends come off the board, then you're pretty much stuck making a declaration when you don't want to. Like you have to take 2 of Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, and Antonio Gibson or Clyde Edwards-Helaire if you want to reach for him as well. DeAndre Hopkins is there. So I will say I don't want 12. I would much rather be jammed in between 2 through 5 if I don't have one, because at least in those spots, you let everyone else make the decision for you. Like if you're at number 4 and it starts out CMC, Dalvin Cook, and Zeke or Kamara, you just grab the one left over, whatever. If you're at 5, you do the same thing. You can choose Kelsey or Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams. You can nitpick between wide receiver ones. I don't care, but it's either probably Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams. And so, yeah, just in those spots, it's safer because everyone does the work for you.
Yeah, that certainly makes some sense. Especially the running back situation. I know that the running backs sort of be a very top tier behind McCaffrey, and then there's a big drop off there. So, like, where do you think that drop off is? Does it make sense? Like in most spots here, do you try and get at least one running back, if not go running back those first 2 picks?
My preferred strategy is to draft what they call hero or anchor running back or modified zero, but it's basically taking your first running back and then treating him as if he is that elite player that's going to deliver enough fantasy points per game. The dumbed down threshold is usually 23 points per game. To deliver as your RB1 and 2 at the same time, while you then piece together who you're actually starting at RB2, hoping for spike weeks. That's when you start drafting the Trey Sermon, Javonte Williams, AJ Dillon, the guys we don't know and I don't even consider to have roles in the first couple of months of the season, but are probably league winners the rest of the way. And you can piece together their matchups until that point. But the drop off, I genuinely think happens at 3. If someone says they don't want to choose between Alvin Kamara because perhaps the offense is just ruined after the Michael Thomas injury and less than stellar quarterback play, I totally understand. I think it's more recency bias baked into the product when someone tells me they're down on Ezekiel Elliott, because like all signs point to Ezekiel Elliott bouncing back. There's literally not one thing I'm worried about with Ezekiel Elliott, honestly. But if someone says they're worried about last year, that's fine. Don't take him. You can take a wide receiver. The same thing goes for everyone beyond that. Jonathan Taylor, perhaps offensive injuries around him could just make that offense horrible, not to mention the injuries to Quentin Nelson and Carson Wentz. Also, Naheem Hines still in the roles. Saquon Barkley, of course, we don't know if he's going to play week 1. And even if he's healthy, does it even matter? Because it's a Jason Garrett, Daniel Jones offense with one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Joe Mixon, are they even going to be in game scripts enough to make Joe Mixon matter? He has to be a workhorse. Same for CEH. Is he a 3-down back? Same for Gibson. Is he playing on 3rd downs? So like the drop off legitimately comes after Dalvin Cook. Even though I still take a stand on Zeke, I understand when people tell me they don't want to because they're not comfortable with that. Then you just go wide receiver and that's fine.
Yeah. What about a guy like Derrick Henry? Does the workload concern you with him at some point where he's getting so many carries 2 years in a row? You wonder if the wheels fall off at some point?
Oh yeah. Maybe not so much the wheels fall off, but the defense genuinely has no talent at all. It's one of the worst defenses in the league quietly. And they play, if you look at their first 10 games, they play just an explosive schedule of offense between the Chiefs, Bills. They open against the Cardinals. The list goes on and on. Cowboys as well. Like they're in for some shootouts, and that doesn't really predict well for Derrick Henry. The touches you're talking about, of course, Derrick Henry has 827 total touches combined the past 2 years. The thing is, like, if there's someone to bet on that not affecting, it's probably Derrick Henry. Like, he's probably an anomaly monster. Having said that, I genuinely think he's going to get game scripted out in some cases. So it's not like someone I'm really reaching for, like as an RB6. But if he's there at that point, especially at the end of the first round, there's value there. And I'll just take him because he's still probably going to get every single touch he can handle.
Yeah, I also feel like I like to touch on receiver too, because I feel like wide receiver, like the top of the board has changed dramatically the last 2 years. You go back a couple years ago, it's Julio Jones. You're talking about some of the big guys, Michael Thomas. A lot of them have fallen off. So who are your top 5 receivers right now? Who's that tier 1 for you?
Yeah, so I had already mentioned Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill at the top. And I actually put Tyreek Hill at the top. And it's because the Kansas City offense changed over the second half of the season last year. Tyreek actually averaged 10.7 targets per game in his last 11 contests, including 10 in the 3 postseason games they played. And that's because teams shifted and started playing a league high and 2 high safeties, and thus forcing the Chiefs to not throw deep anymore. So what they do, you saw Tyreek Hill's slot rate increase. You saw his average depth of target drop because they just started pelting him underneath, and he's an explosive player. So of course he got tons of yards after the catch. And so they just jammed him targets. And I think that continues into this year, which is why he's my number 1. Having said that, when someone says my wide receiver 2, Devontae Adams, is their wide receiver 1, totally understand. No argument whatsoever. He's actually averaged 11 targets from Aaron Rodgers per game, and the 25 full starts they've made together dating back to week 9 of the 2019 season when Adams returned from injury that year. So I totally get it. It's a high floor. After that, it is Stephon Diggs, who recall last year's first year with Josh Allen and Brian Daigle, a career high, 166 targets, also led the league in catches and receiving yards. And then in the 7 starts he made without John Brown, who of course went to the Raiders this year, he averaged 12 targets per game, Diggs did. So a little bit more of a ceiling and meat on the bone than we think. Then it goes Calvin Ridley, all because we're taking Julio Jones out of there. And I understand we're plugging Kyle Pitts in. I don't know how to forecast for Kyle Pitts because he's a unicorn, but he's also a first-year rookie tight end. And as we know, they typically struggle because it's the hardest position in the league. You have to learn tight end, wide receiver, and offensive line all in like 3-month span during training camp. It's just impossible. And then 5th is still DeAndre Hopkins. Since he still led the team, he had the league's second highest target share, 29% among all wide receivers last year.
Yeah, it does sound like a good list here. I'll definitely have that written down for when I get ready for my drafts coming up here. And in terms of the other position that's very challenging is always tight end because there's so little quality at the top. And you have the debate, do I take Travis Kelce round 1 or at the beginning of round 2? When do I take Waller and Kittle? And when do I avoid that dreaded like 4 through 7 round tight end there? So how are you attacking tight end this year?
I don't do the wait for a tight end thing. And I think preseason week 1 proved that. Just we always tout the guys we like at the end in the middle of the rounds, but it just doesn't matter because they don't have sustained secure roles. Mike Gesicki played 5 of 13 first team snaps, and because they added Jalen Waddle, the Dolphins did, with the number 6 overall pick. And as we know, the past 2 years, Gesicki's been top 2 in slot rate. So what happens? He can't even get on the field because he was a slot receiver, and Jalen Waddle takes the reps. So there's no point in drafting him. Someone also mentioned someone like Adam Troutman. Especially me. Like I was high on Adam Troutman in 2 tight end builds throughout the offseason, but he was so good as a pass blocker last year, PFF's number 1 pass blocking tight end in grades, that he's not playing 3rd down snaps running routes. He's staying in to block on those snaps, which is awful. So again, we're just losing all of our favorite tight ends, Anthony Ferguson included, who only played in 11 personnel and would only come in on 3rd down, which maybe means he'll have spike weeks probably, but he's not really a safe option for tight end 2 builds. So yeah, I try to get to one of the top 4 guys, and the top 4 guys dejected. It's Kyle Pitts or Mark Andrews at number 4. I don't care. I love Mark Andrews again. I'm on the Ravens bounce back this year, but I try to get one of those and then basically for redraft, not draft another one because again, like all our late round favorites are dying. Like they just don't matter. You have to find someone who's just out there playing snaps and running routes. And the guys we are touting historically just don't hit. So I don't wait on that.
Yeah, I think the guy that interesting to me most is Kelce because obviously he puts up elite production, like a number 1 receiver level production. So like, I know you mentioned before, like, oh, when you're at the turn of the draft this year, if you're 12, like you haven't, instead of having to declare, oh, I want like the 6th best running back or the 7th best receiver. How about just taking Travis Kelce while those 2 picks? How do you think about that strategy?
Which strategy? Kelce, then who?
At the turn, instead of having to declare a receiver or a running back, like it's a lower quality than what you would like.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And at the turn, if Kelce never makes the turn, so like, well, maybe in home league redrafts he will, and if so, like that's someone I like to jump on. But and let's say you're playing underdog or FFPC, if Waller gets there, I consider him in line, like eye to eye with Kelce, honestly. And then someone like Hill or Adams, like you said, if they are there. The issue is that a lot of times they aren't there, and then you're forced to choose. And if that becomes Ridley or Diggs, like that's great. I'll take that every time and I'd be happy with that. But yeah, the first second turn is just tough. You have to hope some of those players make it there.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go to the quarterback position because obviously, like you're probably going a little early than you want to if you're getting Patrick Mahomes, as you're getting that security built in there and you have that tier built in. There's also the strategy of, hey, I'm going to wait till the middle rounds, get some value at the quarterback, and find that guy who goes very low and ends up putting up huge numbers, sort of like Aaron Rodgers did last year. He was probably like an 8th or 10th quarterback off the board. He ends up being an MVP candidate. So, what are some values you're looking at the quarterback position?
All the rookie quarterbacks, honestly. I believe they're all going to start many more games than we perceive, and they all have rushing upside. Trevor Lawrence rushing upside, Trey Lance, Justin Fields rushing upside. Even Zach Wilson's going to start 17 games no matter what, and he averaged 9 carries per game across 30 starts at BYU. So all of them you can pick and choose between them. Let's say you pick someone like Lance or Fields, though, and they're not starting week 1. That's fine. I have been doing that in my redraft leagues and still taking either Sam Darnold or Zach Wilson with him because not only do they play each other and what I expect to be a shootout. It opened at 44. I think the number's wrong. I'm expecting it to close between 48 and 50 and both team totals to increase in week 1. But also they both have two of the easiest schedules through week 6 in the entire league. And the 49ers bye week is in week 6. So you can really just draft one of them to mask for Lance, and then start them throughout that stretch. And hopefully Lance is starting by week 7. That's the approach I've been taking in all my redraft leagues.
That's an interesting approach. Well, one guy I'm also going to get your take on the quarterback board is personally is Matthew Stafford, because obviously he leaves Detroit, which has become like a disaster for him. Now he goes to LA where Sean McVay wants to air it out. He has more weapons out there. The defense is great. So you always have concerns about game flow where if they get ahead, they start running, try and put it away. What do you think about Stafford's fantasy prospects?
Yeah, Stafford's a good one. It's just tough because he's jammed there with Tom Brady and Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow does have sneaky rushing upside. He did in college as well, but the statues obviously have to perform far above expectations. Like Aaron Rodgers was a top 10 quarterback last year because he had a 9% touchdown rate. And again, that's not really sustainable. And so that's why I'm not really trying to focus on him and draft him, because you need guys who are going to offer anything with their legs. Even Justin Herbert has a little rushing upside. Even Russell Wilson, a tiny bit of rushing upside. So I prefer, even though I do like Stafford's outlooks, he's more of a guy like I'll target the matchup in DFS, then I'll try to start weekly because I think I need a higher floor.
Yeah, that makes some sense. So let's go wrap up a couple of here because obviously everybody's looking for their sleepers here. Who are some sleepers you have in mind? Maybe like a handful of guys that you could say you're not getting drafted high and you think they have big years.
So someone, it's probably not a sleeper, but I'm still higher on than consensus. And I'll give some later round guys too, but this one is going like the 4th or 5th round. It's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's real opportunity here for him to be a 3-down option. And if that's the case, he's the guy everyone thinks Antonio Gibson will be. He played, Edwards-Helaire did, on 3rd downs in the first preseason game, whereas last year he did not. So we already have a leg up. Then also remember, through those first 6 games last year, he averaged 17 carries and 5 targets per game. Then they added Le'Veon Bell. He got the ankle injury. So, of course, his workload dipped from that point forward. But they've already used Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a workhorse before, showing they do trust him. And so I think everyone's forgetting that and still hoping these other guys are treated like that. And so, honestly, as long as CEH gets the 3rd down snaps, he is an every down option. And I'm banking on that. So I'm much higher than him on consensus. If you want a really late round sleeper, I think Kadri Ollison in the very last round is someone who I understand will clog your roster at first, but it just makes sense because he's the direct backup. Javian Hawkins, the 5'7", 187, 167 something. He's so undersized, is not someone who's going to legitimately make a run for that backup job, let alone an every down guy. And Mike Davis, we know, is a pass catching option, but also if we were higher on Mike Davis, we'd be drafting him higher. He's not budging at all from the 5th to 8th rounds. And we just don't know about his carry role. And so just the fact that Kadri Ollison is there and is much bigger and could be a 1st and 2nd down option, creating a role for himself at the end of the season, is someone I'm willing to take a chance on in the last round as a sleeper and then clog him on my roster until hopefully he carves out a job for himself.
Yeah, that's certainly intriguing. Let's go the other way here. The busts and maybe more regression candidates, like you mentioned earlier, because it's like some of those Bills you're concerned about they're being overdrafted. Or some guys who you would personally stay away from.
So Antonio Gibson, another high one, I know. And again, I consider a fade to be someone like he's going in this range, thus I'm not taking him this range. Antonio Gibson's going in the first, second round turn, and it's just something I can't get behind. Not only because he didn't play third down snaps over J.D. McKissic last year, he did not play a single third down snap over J.D. McKissic in the first preseason game. Also, he was only good in 2 games. Like he only provided RB1 value in 2 games, and both of those were the Cowboys over 100 yards. His next closest was 90 yards with 2 catches against the Bengals. And if he doesn't have catches, he's just another guy that everyone's overdrafting. Like you could instead just draft Joe Mixon and after Antonio Gibson if Gibson doesn't get third downs. So I'm not really focusing on him. Other than that, someone else high I would say is Saquon Barkley. Not even just the injuries. And maybe let's say he even plays week 1. You still then have to evade and hope he's better and just outperforms like whatever Jason Garrett tried to do to drag him down, whatever the offensive line does to drag him down, whatever Daniel Jones does to drag him down. There's just too many hills to climb. So it's not someone I'm drafting even in the second round. It's just someone I'd much rather avoid. And in the later rounds, I would say it's pretty much Giants players, as well as someone, let's say Will Fuller, who is battling injuries throughout camp right now. A new scheme I'm concerned of him transitioning into, because I do get the feeling they're going to throw it downfield less now this year with Tua, and just the fact that he isn't healthy.
Yeah, that's certainly some good stuff to know to get ready for our fantasy draft on these. John, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, I hope you follow on social media, keep up with some of your coverage for NBC Sports.
Yeah, at not Jay Daigle on Twitter, not Jay Daigle on Twitter. And then, of course, NBC Sports Edge. You can find my best ball tiers there. You can find my top 150 there. And then again, plugging the online draft guide, you can use the code Daigle10 to get 10% off. It's on the homepage at NBCSportsEdge.com. And we're constantly updating everything, the rankings, the tiers, everything else for you to be updated and ready for draft season.
I'll be one place I'll be checking every week. I get ready to set my lineups. John, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.